Hello, and welcome to today's ACM Learning webinar. This webcast is part of ACM's commitment to lifelong learning and serving the over 100,000 computing professionals and students who are ACM's members. I'm Carla Carter. Currently, I'm an associate professor in the College of Science and Technology at Bellevue University. I have over 20 years of experience teaching undergraduate and graduate courses in information technology ethics, emerging technologies, enterprise data, social engineering, e-commerce, and web development, and have been awarded Bellevue University's Excellence in Online Teaching Award. My research interests focus on the intersection of information technology and society, particularly in the areas of social media and privacy. I'm also Vice Chair for ACM SIGCAS, the ACM special interest group that addresses the social and ethical consequences of widespread computer usage. ACM offers educational and professional development resources that bolster skills and enhance career opportunities. Our members can stay competitive in the constantly changing world of computing with a range of ACM Learning Center resources at learning.acm.org. You can see some of the highlights on your screen. ACM recognizes the role of computing in driving the innovations that sustain competitiveness in a global environment. ACM provides timely computing information published by ACM, including communications of the ACM and Q magazines, access to the ACM Digital Library, the world's most comprehensive database of computing literature, international conferences that draw leading experts on a broad spectrum of computing topics, support for education and research, including curriculum development, teacher training, the ACM Turing and ACM InfoSys Foundation Awards. ACM enables its members to solve critical problems using new technology that enriches our lives and advances our society in the digital age. Before we get started, I'd like to mention a few housekeeping items shown on the slide in front of you. In the top right corner of the slide area on your screen, there is a button that will allow you to enlarge the slides. You may also enlarge the slides at any time by dragging the corner of the slide window. The slides will advance automatically throughout the event. During this presentation, you can minimize the slide area, Q&A, and bio screens using the buttons on the bottom panel. You can also use a number of widgets also found on the bottom panel, including Facebook, Twitter, Wikipedia, and a resource list where you can get a copy of the slides. If you are experiencing problems with our web interface, please refresh your console by pressing the F5 key in Windows or Command R if you're on a Mac. Refresh your browser if you're on a mobile device, or close and relaunch the presentation. You can also visit the webcast help guide by clicking on the Help widget below the slide window. To control volume, please adjust the master volume on your computer. At the end of our presentation, we will have time for questions, and we hope you will have several. If you think of a question during the presentation, please type it into the Q&A box and click on the Submit button. You do not need to wait until the end of the presentation to begin submitting questions. You may also use the Q&A box and the survey at the end to suggest topics for future webinars. At the end of the presentation, you'll see a survey open in your browser. Please take a minute to fill it out to help us improve our webinar. This session is being recorded and will be archived. You will receive an automatic email notification when it is available, or you can check learning.acm.org in a few days for updates. You can also use the Facebook and Twitter widgets on the bottom panel to share the presentation link with your friends, as well as tweet comments and questions using the hashtag ACMWebinarSec. We'll be watching for your tweets. Today's presentation is Getting Cyber Safety Through to Employees and Anyone Else by Ron Woerner. Ron is the Director of Cybersecurity Studies at Bellevue University. He has over 25 years of corporate and military experience in IT and security, and has worked for HDR, TD Ameritrade, ConAgra Foods, Mutual of Omaha, CSG Systems, and the State of Nebraska. Ron earned a BS from Michigan State University and an MS from Syracuse University. He's a certified information systems security professional, certified information security manager, certified ethical hacker, and holds Toastmasters Advanced Communicator and Leader designations. He is the Air Force Association CyberPatriot 2013-2014 Mentor of the Year for his work with high school cybersecurity competitions. Ron loves to talk to others who are passionate about security and privacy. Ron, we look forward to your presentation here today.
Outstanding. Thank you, Carla. I appreciate ACM for sponsoring this great talk. Wow, is it timely with all the events that we're seeing in the news, from Brad and Angelina Jolie hiring cybersecurity professionals to watch their kids, to the Sony breach. It's been a very interesting year, and that's why I'm so excited to talk about cyber safety and security, because we all need to be part of the solution. It's a common problem. We're all hooked up online. We use multiple devices often to connect with our friends, family, organizations, financial institutions. But what can we do to help ourselves, our employees, stay safe online? Simple questions it may seem, with some pretty complex answers. I want to encourage you again to use the hashtag to send in any comments or questions, and to use the Q&A feature to push any questions out to us, which I will address at the end. Let me start by asking a simple question it may seem, but again, complex answer. So please use the poll question feature as part of the webinar. For what % of security breaches were caused by human error? In other words, how much has human error contributed to the recent security breaches? So please take a moment to answer through the preview, push it out, so you can begin to see in real time how this is pulling out. Well, as you can see with the audience, tends to think it's a higher percentage. I'm kind of curious, if I had added an 80 or 90%, how many of you might have clicked on that? Well, according to one source, futuristtech.info, who created this really cool infographic. You can see the link at the bottom. And yes, I provide full links, so you know I'm not going to try to fish you during this presentation. Through their research, they found 31% of the worst security breaches were actually caused by inadvertent human error. As a security professional, I see this all the time and have been seeing it for years, where people create vulnerabilities or backdoors without really thinking about it. I have a quick story on that. I was at a recent fraud conference, and I look around for open Wi-Fi. I saw one called Auditorium, so I connected to it, pulled up a web page, and it took me to the wireless projector. Okay, I could have caused a little bit of damage maybe, but I saw over to the side a button that said Admin. Being naturally curious, I clicked on it. It took me to a login page. User ID admin. All right, I'll give you one guess as to the password. Yep, it was admin. So I typed in admin, got me into the administrative screen. Okay, full disclosure, that's where I jumped over the ethical lines because I did not first have permission to access the administrative page. But again, I'm a trained professional. I do this for a living. And as soon as we were on a break, I went and I talked to their IT guy about it. He said, oh yeah, I threw up that Wi-Fi and created the admin just for earlier in the week, and I forgot to take it down. It's a great example of what we're continually seeing out in the industry, where people create vulnerabilities and backdoors without even thinking of the potential ramifications. So that's what we want to cover today, talking about the human paradox and how we all tend to contribute to the issue. Dilbert is a great example. From their cartoon, the pointy-haired boss clicking on a phishing email, or this could even be, because he's pointy-haired boss, a spear phishing, which is directed at upper management. And those spear phishes are very good. They look exactly like a well-crafted email because these phishers do their homework. It's big business for them now. We're seeing organized crime is very well connected into the world of cyber hacking. With the human paradox and phishing, we also see how susceptible everybody can be. In fact, most people who conduct phishing for a living as part of security testing report the same statistic, that there's a 10% victim rate. No matter how hard you try and how well you educate your workforce, there's always going to be a percentage, usually around 10%, who are going to click on that email. Even Chris Hadnagy, the very well-known social engineer, again, does it for a living, he says, I've sent out 2.3 million spam email this year. Even I have clicked on a spam email. It took that second of mindlessness. It looked real to me for a second, so I clicked on it and it took me to a login page. Fortunately, nothing occurred because he realized that was the problem right there. And that's what we want to encourage with the user behavior. If you see that 15% report rate, when something bad happens, it's okay to report it, and you're not going to be lambasted or degraded for it. You just do a quick check. Hey, I clicked on a spam, took me to a phishing site. I did not put in my credentials. You talk to the help desk and just do a quick virus check because sometimes those sites have malware associated with them. And then you move forward. Don't put in your credentials. Or if you do put in your credentials, then you need to take further steps to ensure your identity isn't stolen. But the idea is to work with your end users. And that's what we're covering today in this talk, about how do we work with the humans, even if a lot of us are techies. Oh, and by the way, I am a geek. I've been using computers for well over 30 years, but it's interesting, almost universally, a lot of the top cyber security professionals realize the huge aspect of the human element. I love this cartoon. This is Pogo, drawn by Walt Kelly in 1971, if you believe it. This was for Earth Day. As you can see, the Earth is all messy, and now we're seeing that with cyberspace. But yet that mess is often caused by our own negligence, our own mindlessness. So the idea is not to be our own worst enemy, or at least be aware of how that it could occur. One of the big elephants in the room I mentioned earlier, and Randy Pausch from the last lecture, Carnegie Mellon, said, when you have an elephant in the room, name it. Well, the elephant in the room, this week at least, is Sony Pictures with their recent breaches. But I don't want to pick on Sony because what we're going to see and what we continually see is that this is happening continually across multiple other organizations. And we need to be learning from these organizations. For example, you can see with this link here from Bloomberg, it's beginning to directly attribute the recent breaches with organizations and companies' stock price, which is a great visual aid. So we can begin to understand that, yes, these breaches are beginning to hurt companies in the pocketbook. And because it is hurting them financially, they're beginning to take more and more positive action. But we need to be working together and learning from each other how to prevent these type of breaches. What's kind of funny about this slide is I've had a similar slide in talks for about 4 years, and I swear every year I just change the year. 2011 was the worst year in breaches, and then 2012 the worst year in breaches, 2013, now 2014. So here's my prediction for 2015. The trend is just going to continue. Sadly enough, we're going to continue to see major breaches. The industry is still maturing. We're still figuring out how to use the internet and how to secure documents. And until it becomes a regular practice for companies and for people, we're going to continue to see issues. I have an analogy with the automobile industry. How long did it take for people to wear seatbelts? Seatbelts were available in the early 1960s, yet it didn't take until the mid-1970s till a higher percentage actually began using them. I fear that we're going to see the same thing in the cyber world. So what is this human paradox? Well, humans, they continue to be our weakest link. But can we live without them? Of course not. So how do we work with our humans, not against them? Often that is done through a security awareness campaign. So please take a moment on your screen and choose one of these selections. How often does your organization perform security awareness? One quick note to think about. If your organization only does security awareness during orientation, please use the when they think about it as your option. Because if you think about it, that's about all they may do is when it's absolutely needed. So does your organization perform security awareness once a month, once every 6 months, once a year, when they think about it, or what is that? Mainly meaning that they never do it. I'll give you a few seconds to log your response. So if you all were to guess what the answer would be for the majority, think about that now as well. I think this is very telling with the result. I'll give you another second. All right, the voting is in, and we have an answer. It seems to be pretty tied between once a year and when they think about it, usually meaning orientation. Okay, so think about this. And I'm assuming we have well over 200 people on the call. I'll have to look at the demographics when we're done to see the number of responses here. And if you still want to respond, what's really telling is that only 1/3 of the organizations do it regularly. It's actually less than that. 23% do it once every 6 months to once a month. About 1/3 does it once a year. And almost 50% does it when they think about it. Okay, this is with knowledge workers who are part of ACM or guests of ACM on this call. So if we're not getting it yet, what do we expect with Joe and Jane's six-pack? How are they going to get the message out about cyber safety and cybersecurity and awareness? And that's what I want you to think about. How do we get this message out? Well, in studying cybersecurity awareness campaigns, it occurred to me that there are actually two reasons why organizations have an awareness program. The big one we often see is number one, check a box. We are required to have PCI cybersecurity training once a year in order to say you're compliant with the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standards, or PCI DSS. That is very common, but are we really changing the behaviors? That's the real objective behind an awareness program, is to encourage the right behaviors, discourage the wrong behaviors, and to educate our employees to always make the right decisions. So as you're looking at your organization's security awareness program, think about why is it there? And then maybe work with the people developing it so they know that you need to add people as the equation, because that's really what it's all about. There's always going to be people associated with the technology. So many of us, particularly on this call, are techies. We're geeks, we're nerds. We know how to handle ourselves with a computer. Are we working with the employees, though, to give them that knowledge to protect themselves? And how do we work with people? It's part of this talk. So what do we do to solve the issue with the human paradox? First of all, we want to make sure the employees are part of the solution. When I worked at a Fortune 200 company, we called it universal participation. Universal participation is engaging everybody to be part of the security solution. Because if they're not, almost anybody could be part of the problem. If they put out information on the internet that shouldn't be there, or rather common scenario, they take a sensitive document, they put it on a thumb drive, or they put it in their Dropbox online, because we all love the cloud, and then they don't have a secure password on, and I'm not just picking on Dropbox, it'll happen on Box, on SkyDrive, almost any of these. It's not the technology that's the problem, it's the user who doesn't know how to properly secure it. And then that file gets leaked. Or the USB drive, I put it on a USB drive to work on it at home, and then I lose the USB drive. Or then I have the sensitive document on my home PC. How often is that happening in your organization? It could be a hard answer to determine because employees aren't going to often confess when these bad things happen. But we need to be aware of how these could occur. So for an effective awareness campaign, it takes three aspects. One, we need to educate to change specific behaviors. If you just begin telling your users, hey, be cyber safe, what the heck does that mean? We need to give them specific instructions. Use two-factor authentication Or if you're going to have a single password, make sure it's very long and robust and not tied to something about you. But we want to start with why, and I'm going to go into each of these points in more detail. Another common technique I like to use, I just ask a simple question: who owns the headache? Okay, so Mr. Marketing Professional, if your laptop gets infected with malicious software, who is that really going to affect? It may not necessarily affect the whole company. It may just affect you and your direct clients. But who then owns the headache? It's that marketing professional who needs to spend a day waiting for that laptop to be reimaged, because reimaging is often the quickest, easiest way to get rid of and be sure malware is gone. So ask, who owns the headache? And then know that we all do. And then building a security mindset. So this way, when people begin to recognize security issues, they can report it. That idea actually comes from the New York City Police, where they had a simple slogan: if you see something, say something. We want to do that with our employees. So jumping ahead, talking about educating, changing specific behaviors, this is actually from Simon Sinek. He has a book and an awesome TED talk called Start with Why, starting with the story. So making the invisible, and let's be honest, a lot of what we're doing online is invisible to most users. Look, Ma, no wires. So why do I need to secure myself online, your users may ask. Don't we have a security department to do that? Haven't we paid for a firewall and antivirus to keep us safe and secure? I'm hoping at this point you're seeing that that's a pretty ludicrous question. Because, again, we need the defense in depth. So you explain, well, we're trying to make sure not only the organization is secure, but that you are too. Because if there is an issue, just think about all the trouble you may have to go through. And that actually gets into the next point: who owns the headache? But then we begin to describe how. Okay, so how can you make yourself more secure? So why? Oh, another idea that I've used very successfully. I've given presentations for Bring Your Kid to Work Day at a company. Why would I do that? Well, because parents will secure their kids. They'll think about, how do I secure my kids online? And the idea is for them to use those same behaviors at work. It has a nice rebound effect. If we can get you thinking about keeping yourself and your family safe online at home, hopefully you can take those same behaviors and use them in the workplace. So the next question to ask after why is how. So how do we do that? And then designing the visual stories. Well, how is through using safe and secure passwords, making sure if you write them down that they are kept in a locked container. Don't share your password with anyone you don't trust. And keep in mind, make sure anyone you may share your password with is someone you do trust implicitly. That the systems administrators won't ask you for a password, or they shouldn't anyway. So those simple stories go a long way with people. And then lastly, the what. So the clarity. So the what is you need to create a password. What you want to do is mix up the characters. We've all heard these password stories in a way to create a secure password. So use that storytelling. It goes a long way. The idea, make it personal for the people. What can you do that they care about? Not all employees care about the organization. The larger the organization, the larger the number, just through pure statistics, that you're going to have that may not necessarily have the organization's best interest at heart. But if you find something that they do care about, and then connect it as part of the cyber safety, it goes a long way. I've already briefly explained who owns the headache, but we sometimes don't realize how much of a headache sometimes it's occurring. Just ask Sony now how much of headaches they are seeing. Actually, I would label it closer to a migraine. And you could almost use that headache scale when looking at the different cyber events. You know, is this going to be a little minor one that's a little blip, or is this going to be a major migraine? And that actually helps develop the risk equation on the impact. Yes, granted, it's very qualitative, but it begins to ask the right questions. What is the potential impact to the business? Again, talking about that marketing guy. Okay, his laptop goes down because he was surfing somewhere he shouldn't have. Who does that really affect? How many people will it affect? And from that, looking at that equation, you can begin to determine how large of a breach would impact the organization. And then also you can use statistics like from the Verizon Data Breach Report and others as to what is the probability. Let's be honest, the probability of malware is pretty high. Probably most of you have heard this, that there are two types of companies, ones that have been breached and ones that have been breached but haven't said anything yet. So realize that it's a pretty high probability that you're going to see something within the next year. So begin to learn how to fail. That's something we don't teach in schools. How to fail? Well, that's exactly it. Failure is inevitable. Back to the phishing. If you receive a phishing, and let's just say phishing email and you click on it, what steps do you take? Okay, let's be honest, you failed by clicking on it, but that happens to everybody. But I didn't take any actions, I didn't put in any credentials, no harm was done. Okay, that's a successful failure because A, you learned from it, no harm was done. So tying those type of behaviors back to the end users. And this helps develop the security mindset. Basically, it's a way of understanding what are the threats. So who would want to do harm to our organization? How could that harm occur? Knowing vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities are just weaknesses, problems, or issues. So where could we be vulnerable? How could we be vulnerable? Are we creating password lists that are not encrypted, basically in clear text, that are kept on very unsecure devices? Are we taking sensitive documents and putting them on USB drives or putting them out on a shared drive with multiple people having access? And then how could those vulnerabilities be exploited? So how would this actually happen? That's the security mindset. So here's the question I have for you today is what are you doing to build not only your own security mindset, but those of your employees? What we want to do is begin to look at the different risks, threats, and vulnerabilities. What's funny is how often people just stumble on security issues. I work with a local high school, and these high schoolers, fortunately, are really good and ethical. And they tend to find issues. They, just being naturally curious, like high schoolers should be, were working on their school network, and they realized they could see things that they shouldn't have. What's really good with these kids is that they then did the right thing. And being a SIGCAS webinar, sponsored by SIGCAS, talking about ethics, of course, is paramount. When you see something, say something. Call it into your help desk, report it up the chain. And if you are in management and someone reports something to you, please don't hammer them for it. Or if you're a parent and your kid comes up to you and says, Mom or Dad, I just saw something on a web browser I don't think I should have seen. Don't blame the kid. I have teenagers, and what I continually tell them is that it's not that I don't trust them. I don't trust the Internet. Just in general. 2 billion users out there. Just sheer statistics shows that there's going to be a high number of malicious people. So the idea is knowing how to stop it and the ethical disclosure. I've actually done a Twitter chat where I've had someone stalk me and send me malicious tweets, which then I had to quickly block. So knowing how to take the steps. So being a professor, I like to give homework. Part of your homework is to go out on your social media and learn how to secure it. What steps do you need to take? Another story I'd like to share. We've been talking about phishing. This is a great example of how to educate to change behavior. Many large organizations take the time and actually run their own internal phishing attacks, where they send out a phishing email various times during the month. It'll look different ways, and it's often very obvious that it's a phish. But they do this to see how often those people are caught. So you can see the approach here used by a large organization near where I live. where they select the targets, and it's random. So not everyone is going to be targeted every month, and it's not going to be the same time every month. It's not going to look the same. They execute it, and then they work on training the victims. Okay, if you click on it or you forward it, you should have done this. And then they use this metrics. And that's actually from this where I got the metrics earlier. About 10% of users click on phishing. Pretty universal. But they're working on training those users to report it. So work with your users to train them. And then catch people doing something right. This actually comes from a very well-known management book called The 1 Minute Manager, where they talk about, in terms of 1 minute managing, catching people doing things right. So often in security, well, security is sometimes known as the Office of No. We're there to catch people doing things wrong and report on them and get them in trouble. My recommendation is to take the opposite approach, and I've had really good success working in large organizations, Fortune 100, 200 companies. We're not just focusing on the wrong, but on the right. Hey, you locked your screen. Good. Or, hey, you reported the fish. You know, okay, it's going to happen. You click on the fish, but you caught it right away and you reported it within 2 minutes. That's the exact type of behavior we want to see. So think about how you can catch your employees and the people you're working with doing something right. We have one last poll question for you. So here's my question for the audience. What is your greatest cyber awareness challenge? Is it that users don't participate or engage? Management is not involved? There's the lack of good material? I just don't have time to do it? Or other, if you have something else. So please take a moment, click on this poll question, and answer, what is your greatest cyber awareness challenge? And I'll wait till we get a few more. Up to 132, 42% of you. Okay, well, thank you, by the way, for participating in each of these polls. This is very telling. You should be able to see the results now on the screen in front of you. So, according to the users on this call, the people on this call, it's our users. They're not engaging. How do we solve that one? That's by creating that material that is engaging. Again, taking it home, hitting them in the heart, answering that why. Why is it important to me? Phrase I like to use, and keep in mind, I'm prior Air Force, and the military tends to make acronyms out of everything, so my acronym for this is WIFM. WIFM is what's in it for me. Let's be honest, that's how a lot of people think. So as you're developing your security awareness, back to that, make it personal. What's in it for them? Hopefully then they will see why they need to engage and participate, because again, it's their own headache they're preventing. Management not involved, this is a classic issue. Back in the mid-1980s, two gentlemen from Purdue University, and I do know one is an ACM member, Dr. Eugene Spafford, he came up with a phrase which I love, and it's so applicable. So Spaff's law, as it's known, is if you have responsibility for security, but you don't have the authority to enforce it, you're just there to take the blame when something goes wrong. In other words, you're a security figurehead. Is that how it is with your security department? How do we work to get the authority to match the responsibility today? Well, again, it's showing the upper management, show them the statistics like from Bloomberg, where we are now seeing large companies who are being financially impacted in a major way. It's no longer just about, we're not really going to take a reputation hit. How much of a reputation hit have these large companies taken this year? Starting last year with Target. Now, granted, not everybody takes the time to think, okay, well, I'm not going to shop there this holiday season because of their breach last year. but it has impacted them and is hurting the bottom line. So taking it back to management with facts. This way we're not caught with SPAF's law. Okay, the time to do it, yes, we're all busy, but it's a pay me now or pay me later type of approach. A lot better to do things up front and early, and just to start slowly. Often what you need with cybersecurity awareness is plant seeds. You just start with the education and you move forward. There is plenty of good material out there, and this slide shows where you can find a lot of it. In fact, thanks to, and hat tip to Carla Carter, our moderator today, for sending this word to me, infobesity. Infobesity, according to the Urban Dictionary, is a glutton of information, where we're now seeing we've moved from the information age to the too much information age, TMI. There is a lot of free material out there on cyber safety and awareness, and cybersecurity, information security. You can see a couple of the sites here. Recently, last October, was National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, sponsored by National Cybersecurity Alliance, NCSA. They run staysafeonline.org. So if you go to staysafeonline.org, you don't have to click here if you don't want to. It basically just takes you out to staysafe.org/NCSAM for National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Hopefully your organization took part. If not, start planning for October 2015. Another day to think about for data privacy is Data Privacy Day on January 28th. You can go out to the Stay Safe Online site for information on that. So if you're looking maybe for one day to have your employees to think about data privacy. Did I mention the resources on those sites are freely available for general awareness and education? I don't know about you, but I love free stuff. So take advantage of it. Use this free material. Another great resource that I use is from Stay Safe Online, where they provide specific, remember I talked about earlier, specific advice. So keeping the clean machine doesn't mean putting in the washing machine. No, it's staying up to date on patches, running antivirus, anti-spyware applications, making sure you're in a safe environment to start with. The thinking twice about your device is, how does your device work? Okay, so here's my challenge to you, those who are on this webinar. Take out your smartphone. And no, I'm not going to hack it. I just want you to look at it and think about what are the different ways that your smartphone communicates. I have an iPhone 4S. It has 9 different ways of communicating. A lot of us don't realize all the different ways. It's got the input and output jacks. It's got the screen. It's got Wi-Fi. It's got 3G. It's got 4G LTE. It's got Bluetooth. It's got GPS. And if you have a later edition of a smartphone, you may have near-field communications. That's a lot of different communication channels to need to secure. So think about what you can do. And that's the idea, thinking twice about your device. How do we set up secure by default with them? And that's also the idea with you're only as strong as the network to which you connect. Know how you're connecting, where you're connecting. Use filters just to keep yourself safe online. Another great resource I encourage you to use is the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center, or MSISAC. You can go to msisac.cisecurity.org. This is a large statewide United States organization that sponsors a lot of cyber education. They have a monthly webinar, which I highly recommend, plus a lot of different guides. Their theme of Stop, Think, Connect. Great phrase to remember how to keep yourself online. All right, so this link wants me to go, they want me to click on this link. I'll stop and think about it before I connect. If you're looking for more information, you can see the STC is Stop, Think, Connect, stcguide.com. And if you're looking for PSAs or public service announcements, these are nice, quick, 30-second videos on cyber safety and cybersecurity. Again, freely available for the consumer use, and actually for a lot of organizations. They make them freely available because they realize the only way we're going to solve the cyber breach problem we keep seeing is if we all band together and pull together and educate each other, because it's just going to take time to do. More information, as I mentioned, from Stay Safe Online, plus the Department of Homeland Security has their Stop Think Connect site. And maybe I'm just an optimist, but I really don't think all of the U.S. federal government is out to get us, where we actually have a great resource with the Department of Homeland Security trying to get the message out about online safety. The slides will be available, so if you don't catch all of these links, it's okay. We'll make them available to you so you can go to them later. To reiterate, it's about the people. It's about working with the people that are around you, knowing what they have to work with and knowing that they need to understand and engage with cybersecurity awareness. This is a quick slide about who I am. I'm Ron Woerner. I work at Bellevue University in Bellevue, Nebraska. I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm just passionate about helping people secure themselves online. Again, it's going to take a lot of people, a lot of time to work through this issue. So let's work together to solve it. If you're interested in cybersecurity competitions, connect with me offline about US CyberPatriot. It's an awesome competition for middle school and high school students to learn hands-on through a safe virtual environment about cyber safety. What questions do you have? At this point, please use the Q&A, or you can use the Twitter hashtag. Ask these questions so we can begin to learn from each other. I love good topical questions from people and from students. So Carla, let's move on to the questions and answers.
Great. Thank you, Ron. Our first question is this is from Debbie. Debbie's looking for tips on generating and managing safe and secure passwords.
Great question, Debbie. Thank you for asking it. Generating and using safe and secure passwords. Yes, passwords, as much as we may hate them, they're there. I recommend using some type of a password keeping device. One of them is KeePass. Another is, of course, I'm drawing a blank now, SafePass. What you can do is you can create basically a secure safe for your passwords. And this way you can create safe passwords and really long passwords. Keep in mind, the longer the better. The more complex, the better. The whole problem with this is that long and complex, really hard to remember. If you need to write them down, I'm actually one of the weird cybersecurity people who say, okay, go ahead, write down your passwords, but maybe don't put down the user ID or the application or website you use with it, and then lock up that password. That way you have it if you need it. So LastPass is one, RoboForm is another. Maybe using a password generating site like supergenpass.com or Strong Password Generator that will help you generate a password. Please don't use a password that can be identified with you. I've done password cracking, and it was rather fascinating. About 10% of people used their cars. A certain percentage used their kids' names. I've actually done it where a friend of mine used his kid's name. I went up to his cube, and I asked which of his kids was Charlie. He pointed to his kid, and then he looked at me with really big eyes saying, you got my password. Yeah. So please, don't use your kids' names. So hopefully, Debbie, I have answered your questions about passwords. Carla, what next question do you have for me?
We have one from Hyacinth. Based on your research, how many breaches are not reported by corporations for the fear of not turning customers away?
Good question. And this is one that is very hard to determine. I don't actually have a number in front of me for this, so this is one I will be glad to answer offline because I want to make sure I get you the right answer for it. Part of the challenge is that it's not reported. So how do we report on not reported breaches? It's part of the challenge. There are actually some channels and there are some researchers who are trying to pull this in and trying to get organizations to self-report in a safe manner so they don't need to put in their name, they just need to explain what happened so we can learn from it. The idea is to provide that safe mechanism for reporting. What we're seeing, though, with a lot of the state data privacy laws is that if there is any personal information leaked, it's law across 47 different states here in the United States to disclose. But unfortunately, those laws are different per state and almost different per circumstance. So check your own state laws to see. I will provide a better answer for you, though, Hyacinth. That's a great, great question. Next one, Carla.
Hi, next one's from Lawrence. He would like to know specifically about the threat from steganographic attacks, such as prevalence indicators, detection tools, and other countermeasures.
Okay, great question. Steganography is a way to hide information in information. What we'll often see is, and this is happening and is happening with Facebook pictures. Someone, say a terrorist, hides information in a picture which they post on their Facebook site or on someone else's Facebook site. They share it out, and it's a picture of a kitten or a puppy, and who doesn't like pictures of kittens and puppies? So how prevalent is it? The indicators can be very challenging because a lot of the programs now hide the hidden messages using steganography very well, where it barely changes the signature. One method is if you have the original picture, you can do a comparison of the original, and you can't do this with a visual eye. You need to be using automation and programs, and there are steganography programs. You can use a checksum program, like an MD5 hash, where you have the original, you take the hash, and then you compare the suspect image. Part of the challenge, though, is you need to have the suspect image. That's where it gets to the threat indicators. So where are our threats coming from? How would they do this? Is it an employee sending a lot of pictures that shouldn't be sent? Now, granted, we have employees sending pictures all the time that may or may not be work-related. It's looking through the other indicators. The way I've often found issues is by looking at other channels where you begin to notice they are sending cryptic email messages which attach the pictures, which it could be an indicator that there is an issue. The idea is that if your gut is telling you there is an issue, there probably is. And unfortunately, there's not a rock-solid answer to this, Lawrence, where we don't have a check for every single picture that comes around. I don't think we'll ever be available to do that just because of the sheer volume of pictures or other documents. You can hide actually using steganography information in a Word document. So you need the ability to compare the original versus the one that's suspect. Comes back to is if you see something, say something, work with your security group, and they have the tools that are available. I'll also provide more information on this offline. Carla, what's our next question? I'm seeing lots of great questions. These are awesome.
John has a question that sort of goes into what you were talking about with some of the social media stuff. Social engineering attacks are always increasing. How can we as consumers of the service force or suggest an organization to change bad authentication processes, such as account verification by using a social security number or personal questions that distant friends, relatives, employers, ex-romantic partners would know the answers to?
Often, and this is known as the Sarah Palin attack. If you remember when she was running as vice president a few years ago, 6 years ago I believe, where someone got into her Yahoo account. And it actually was illegal, so this person was jailed for it. But all he did was basic research of Sarah Palin about her background and then answered those alternative questions to gain access to her Yahoo account. We're going to continue to see this as long as people provide the back channel ways of gaining access through those secret questions. So here's a technique that I recommend to people, is that you don't have to answer those secret questions correctly, as long as you know what those answers are. So when it asks you what's your favorite pet name, maybe answer your favorite sports team. Mix it up, but so you know that algorithm. So no one is going to understand that my answer to my favorite pet is the New York Mets, which of course is all fabricated. I don't want anyone accessing my account. But anyway, that's one tactic you can use. In terms of using account verification using Social Security number, as you know, the last 4 digits of a Social Security number here in the U.S. is not necessarily secret. It's working with them to show them how it can be bypassed. Here's how I can call into the service desk. I mask my phone number so the service or help desk doesn't know it's me. I'm able to determine someone I'm trying to breach, their last 4 of their Social Security number, and I impersonate them. What the help desk can do, it's why they need to be particularly educated, and we don't take enough time educating a help desk and the help desk personnel because they're right on the front line for social engineering. I highly recommend for social engineering research, you go out to social-engineer.org. Great podcast, newsletters on this. The team that runs that site runs the Capture the Flag, the Social Engineering Capture the Flag at DEF CON every year. And this is where they actually practice social engineering against companies, actual companies. And normally out of the 15 they go after, they usually have 14 out of 15 or 15 out of 15 are able to be social engineered through the help desk. So this is just that training. If the help desk person is sensing that there's a problem, ask additional questions. Often it can be, what was the last transaction? And why are we doing this? It's not to be a pain. It's to help save that person from that headache. We're seeing it more and more now with credit cards during this holiday shopping season where they're contacting us. Hey, did you really make this very large purchase? Well, yes, I'm just getting Christmas presents. But I'm very thankful that they're asking me that question. So it's using that independent validation as well. I have one other tip for social engineering. If you think you're being social engineered, the best way to stop it and to figure it out, ask somebody else. Ask your spouse, ask a buddy, ask almost anybody. Hey, does this look fishy to you? This email. They will provide that gut check for you. So if you think you're being social engineered, check with somebody else. That often will save you a lot of headaches. Another great question. Thanks, John. Carla, how are we doing on time, and how many more questions do we got?
We actually have a ton of questions, and I want to tell everyone who's tuned in and asking questions that all of your questions will be answered. If we don't get to them here because we've got about 8 minutes left, then Ron will be answering them offline, and we'll provide that information with later on to those of you who've registered for the webinar. So please don't think that because we haven't gotten to your question here during the webinar that means we're ignoring you. There's just a ton of questions. All right, well, here's one from Bradley. Bradley says, the strategies you've given so far are commonly taught. Exactly how would adherence to these have prevented recent newsworthy cyber attacks such as Sony or any attacks that haven't made the news?
Thank you, Bradley, for the question. You are right. We actually call it in the industry security Groundhog Day. Remember the Bill Murray movie, Groundhog Day, reliving the same day? That's what we feel like. And what we're thinking is being common and obvious may not be. What happened with Sony is that very sensitive documents were not secured. They were not encrypted with either password information or other sensitive information. They weren't secured in any other manner. Plus, maybe they were just left hanging around. So it's, again, providing that specific direction to employees and asking them the question, do you have any sensitive documents that if they got disclosed would cause headaches? That simple question, getting them to, and then providing, okay, if you do, here's the tools you can use, and then providing those tools. Do you even need to have that? If you don't need it, throw it away. And that's true virtually. Large companies I've worked at have spring cleaning for our virtual files because you don't necessarily need to keep everything around forever. Hopefully your compliance department has set up the rules for how long things need to be kept. And what you want to do is follow those rules exactly. So the question, how would adherence to these, it's just getting the employees to think about their behaviors and tying it back to their behaviors, holding the employees accountable when they display poor behavior. You know, hey, you kept this file unencrypted, and it could have caused damage. And then you begin explaining to them, and hopefully their eyes will open. And then again, rather than hammering them, you take the time to educate. So hopefully, Bradley, I have answered your question. Again, for a lot of these, I'm going to be spending the next few weeks providing good answers for you. So I probably will elucidate more in the future. Carla, other questions?
Here's one from Brian, and a bunch of other people have asked this, but I'm going to go ahead and read Brian's. Many administrators take an approach of security through obscurity. How much do we let users know about cybersecurity in our networks when educating them? And this is a theme brought up by multiple people. What about insider threats? What about when the bad guys are the ones who are, the bad people are the ones who are controlling the security?
Okay, well, that last one is a lot tougher. Let's start with the security through obscurity. It has very limited value, so don't rely on it. What you want to do is provide that defense in depth. Maybe have it as one of the areas, but don't have it as your only control in place. A good friend of mine, Jay Jacobs, has a great quote, is we don't need a silver bullet for security. We need silver buckshot. Basically, it's to spread out our approach. So when you begin to see security through obscurity, is to actually call it out and then explain how the threat could be realized and how it could be a vulnerability. One of the common questions asked in cybersecurity channels is, should we be thinking like the bad guys? My answer is yes. That's kind of what makes my job fun, is I get to think all these evil thoughts and be paid for it. But that's where the ethics come in, where I don't actually take advantage of the things I find. I use it to educate and to open eyes. And sometimes, again, it takes multiple times. If you take a marketing class, people need to hear and see things 7 times before it may sink in. Keep that in mind, where if you're just telling someone once, they may not get it. You may have to be very persistent in your approach. So encourage that persistence. Next question, that wily insider. What do we do? And there's always that debate as to how many of these breaches are caused by insiders. It can be hard to tell because often they are not disclosed. Do you include an insider who gets infected with malware in that number? Insiders are an obvious threat. And it's not, again, we don't trust our employees. It's just on any organization, there's always going to be someone who's not really working for you. They may have an ulterior objective. Again, being aware that this could happen, it's not to pinpoint specific employees, but it does happen. Working with your security department to investigate, if not other reasons, to prove innocence. Keep in mind, you don't have to only prove guilt. You can tell people, hey, I want to be able to prove that you didn't do this, or maybe it was someone else who infiltrated your account. And then that third part of the question in terms of the malicious entities or gaining access, one of the top books in cybersecurity, and it's been around forever, since the 1980s, it's called The Cuckoo's Egg. The Cuckoo's Egg was written by Clifford Stoll, and in it he describes his experience, so it's nonfiction. Reads like fiction, though. It's a great novel, where he was a mainframe administrator. He was given the task of figuring out why there was a 75-cent billing error. He then spent the next year and a half of his life tracking down why there was a 75-cent billing error. Long story short, it was East German spies trying to get Star Wars secrets, and they were just using his organization's computer as a bypass. So keep that in mind. One of the questions or one of the statements that bugs me and almost I love to hear sometimes is the person says, well, I don't have anything of value, so I just leave myself wide open. You know, why would anyone want to hack me? That's the exact reason. It's because you're not ready. You're not aware.
That's right.
So anyway, I will wrap it up there. Thanks, Carla.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question from Rebecca. The tolerance for security breaches is increasing. What do you think is the impact going forward on the public's high tolerance for insecure credit cards and corporate infiltration?
Until the people feel the pain directly, I think we're going to continue to see that tolerance. We're beginning to see it with the credit card companies, beginning to actually fine these organizations. They do have a very powerful alliance with the payment card industry, and they've set down the rules with the data security standard. But again, this is part of what's invisible to the end user. Until that end user is tired of getting that third credit card in 4 months, will we not see real action? with this. So I'm afraid we're going to continue to see tolerance, but I'm hoping people can use this as to educate themselves to be part of the solution. So thanks, Rebecca. Another great question.
All right. Well, I'm afraid we have run out of time for today. I'd like to thank Ron Woerner again for his informative presentation and insightful answers to the many questions. A special thanks to each of you for taking the time to attend and participate today. And it should be time for the survey. This webinar was recorded and will be available online in a few days at learning.acm.org/webinar. You can find announcements on upcoming webinars and other ACM activities at learning.acm.org and acm.org. And please do take some time to fill out our quick survey where you can suggest future topics or speakers, which you should see now on your screen. This is Carla Carter saying goodbye for now. Take care, and thank you again for joining us.